The cold bit through Isabella's thin coat as she stood shivering on the pristine driveway, her swollen belly pressing against her with every breath she took. Snowflakes swirled around her, catching in her hair and eyelashes, but she hardly noticed. All she could focus on was the looming mansion ahead, its windows glowing with golden warmth, Christmas lights twinkling as if mocking her misery. Inside, laughter and music poured out from behind the grand doors, a sharp, cruel contrast to the icy chill and aching loneliness that enveloped her. She pressed a hand to her abdomen, feeling the baby shift, a stark reminder of her vulnerability. Her heart raced, panic gnawing at her every thought. She had expected, no, she had hoped, that Dorian would be waiting for her, that he would step out to greet her with concern, perhaps even carry her safely inside to warm herself by the fireplace. But as the minutes stretched into unbearable silence, her hope began to crumble. The doorbell rang fruitlessly, each chime echoing into a void, unanswered. Her voice trembled as she shouted Dorian's name, her breath forming clouds in the cold night air. "Dorian! Please! Open the door! Please!" She banged on the door with frantic desperation, but all that met her ears was the faint echo of her own cries. The muffled sound of laughter and clinking glasses came from inside, unmistakably Vivian's sultry voice mingling with Dorian's deep, carefree laughter. Every note of their joy twisted the knife deeper into Isabella's chest. The mansion's grandeur, the rich decorations, the lavish celebration, it all felt like a cruel joke designed to highlight her helplessness. Her lips trembled as she pressed against the cold wood, willing him to hear, to come out, to remember that she was carrying his child. But no one appeared. The warmth inside seemed impossibly distant, leaving her alone in the snow, trapped between desperation and heartbreak, every second stretching longer as the chill gnawed at her bones and the cold, hard reality of her abandonment sank in fully. Isabella's hands were raw from pounding on the polished mahogany doors, each knock echoing hollowly into the cavernous mansion beyond. Her voice, strained and desperate, pierced the night. "Dorian! Please, it's me! Open the door," she shouted, her words trembling with fear and urgency. The snow clung to her coat, her hair plastered to her damp forehead, and each gust of cold wind made her teeth chatter uncontrollably. She tried pressing her face against the glass, hoping for even a fleeting glimpse of him, hoping that seeing her would stir some compassion in his heart. But the rooms behind the frosted windows were a scene of decadence and indifference, Dorian laughing carelessly with Vivian, their faces illuminated by the warm glow of chandeliers and the sparkling tree in the corner. Vivian's laughter was sharp and cruel, a sound that seared itself into Isabella's memory as if mocking her plight. She called again, her voice breaking. "Dorian! I'm begging you. I can't, please, help me." She staggered slightly as the first contractions gripped her abdomen, making her knees buckle. Pain seared through her body, sharp and sudden, and she leaned heavily against the door, pressing a hand to her stomach. Her breaths came in ragged gasps, frost forming on her eyelashes as the cold gnawed through every layer she wore. She glanced around desperately, hoping someone, anyone, might notice her suffering, but the driveway was empty, and the street lights did little to illuminate the falling snow. Her mind reeled in disbelief. How could the man she loved, the man who had promised her protection and love, turn away in her moment of greatest need? Her heart ached not just from the physical cold but from the emotional betrayal that cut deeper than any winter chill. Helplessness washed over her in waves as tears froze on her cheeks. Every laugh from Vivian inside was a dagger in her chest, every clink of a glass a reminder of her abandonment. She tried to steady herself, tried to gather strength, but the combination of physical pain, emotional devastation, and the biting cold threatened to overwhelm her entirely. She realized with a sinking, shattering certainty that tonight, Christmas Eve, Dorian was not her protector, he was a stranger, a man lost to selfish indulgence, leaving her alone, desperate, and exposed to the merciless night. Isabella shivered as she leaned against the cold door, and her mind, like an uncontrollable tide, carried her back to the beginning of it all. She remembered the first time she met Dorian, in a bustling art gallery where laughter mingled with the soft hum of classical music. He had been magnetic, his presence impossible to ignore, drawing her into a whirlwind romance that felt like something out of a storybook. Every evening had been filled with passion and promise, dinners and candlelit restaurants, weekend getaways in exotic locations, and whispered conversations about a future together, a future that included a family, laughter echoing through the halls of a shared home. She had fallen completely, her heart trusting blindly in the man who made her feel as if she were the center of his universe. But even in those early days, there had been shadows, subtle hints that all was not as perfect as it seemed. Dorian's arrogance would flare in the smallest of disagreements, his obsession with wealth and status more evident with each passing day. The way he spoke of money, his own, her potential inheritance, and the circles they moved in, had seemed harmless then, part of his charm and ambition. She had brushed aside small discomforts, a flippant remark here, a dismissive tone there, convincing herself that love could smooth over any rough edges. And she had convinced herself that his worldliness and high standards were signs of security and sophistication, not a warning of the coldness that could hide behind his charm. Then came Vivian. At first, Isabella had thought little of the young socialite who began appearing at Dorian's parties, always lingering near him with an easy, practiced smile. But slowly, the manipulation became apparent, the sly compliments, the laughter too close, the knowing glances. Isabella's instincts, which she had once trusted, had whispered caution, but love clouded judgment. Vivian's presence was a subtle erosion, a quiet infiltration into the fortress Isabella had thought impenetrable. Every time Dorian prioritized Vivian's company over hers, every secretive smile or unexplained absence, a tiny fissure opened in her heart. Now, standing outside the mansion in the biting cold, watching her husband's betrayal unfold before her eyes, the depth of her heartbreak became undeniable. This was not just neglect, it was the culmination of months of deceit, manipulation, and arrogance that she had chosen to overlook. The world she had envisioned, a loving partner, a secure home, a joyful family, was crumbling. And yet, amidst the pain, the audience could understand her devastation, love so deeply invested, innocence so brutally betrayed, and the cruel irony that the very person she had trusted most had become the source of her despair. Inside the mansion, the atmosphere was electric with festivity, entirely oblivious to the scene unfolding outside. Crystal chandeliers cast a golden glow over the grand ballroom, reflecting off polished marble floors and the glittering ornaments of a massive Christmas tree. Guests in glittering gowns and sharp tuxedos mingled, their laughter ringing through the halls, glasses of champagne catching the light as they toasted and clinked. Soft strains of a string quartet mingled with upbeat holiday songs, creating an ambience of luxury and celebration. Dorian moved through the crowd with effortless charm, laughing heartily, his hand occasionally brushing against Vivian's, eliciting a coy smile from her that only made his amusement grow. Their laughter intertwined, a carefree symphony that seemed almost cruel to any observer who might glimpse the reality outside. Vivian leaned into Dorian, whispering something that made him laugh so hard he almost spilled his champagne. Guests admired their charisma, unaware of the tension that brewed behind the mansion's walls, completely ignorant of the woman shivering in the snow mere steps away. Conversations floated through the room, compliments exchanged, gossip passed along, plans for the coming year discussed, but none touched the desperate reality beyond the doors. Each flash of a camera, every toast raised, every subtle joke shared inside the mansion stood in sharp contrast to the cold, bitter, and painful ordeal Isabella was enduring. Outside, Isabella's breaths came faster, the contractions gripping her with a cruel intensity. Her hands trembled not just from the cold but from fear and pain, her nails pressing into the icy surface of the door as if she could claw her way inside. Every laugh from Vivian, every clink of Dorian's glass, seemed to echo in her chest like a heartbeat of betrayal. She imagined the warmth of the fire, the comfort she could have had if only Dorian had chosen her over indulgence. The stark disparity between the joyous celebration inside and her own suffering made the night feel endless, a cruel mockery of the holiday spirit. As the music swelled and laughter pealed from the ballroom, Isabella pressed her forehead to the frosted glass, tears mingling with the snow, the pain of her betrayal sharp and unyielding. The icy wind cut through Isabella's thin coat as she stumbled down the driveway, her legs unsteady beneath the weight of her swollen belly. Panic surged with each step, and the contractions grew sharper, each wave of pain reminding her of how alone she truly was. The mansion behind her glowed with warmth and laughter, a cruel reminder of the comfort she had been denied. She pressed on, scanning the quiet, snow-covered streets for any place that might offer shelter. The church a few blocks away loomed in the distance, its steeple dusted with snow, and she staggered toward it, praying the doors might be open, that someone, anyone, would let her inside. Each footfall left a fleeting imprint in the fresh snow, a fragile trace of her desperate journey through the merciless night. As she neared the church, she found the doors locked, the cold seeping into her bones. The street was nearly deserted, the few neighbors who peered from windows quickly retreating when they saw her trembling figure. Vulnerability wrapped around her like a suffocating cloak. She was pregnant, alone, shivering uncontrollably, and yet determination kept her moving. She reminded herself that her child's safety depended on her. Pain lanced through her abdomen with every step, but she forced herself forward, each breath labored, each heartbeat a reminder that she could not give up now. A soft light appeared from a nearby house, and through a window, a kind face appeared, an elderly neighbor, Mrs. Callahan, who had seen Isabella pacing and shivering outside Dorian's mansion earlier. Without hesitation, Mrs. Callahan opened the door, her voice gentle but firm. "Come inside, dear. You're not safe out here. Let me help you." Relief crashed over Isabella like a wave. She stumbled into the warm hallway, the familiar scent of cinnamon and firewood enveloping her, and sank into a chair, letting herself breathe for the first time in what felt like hours. Despite the fear and physical pain, Isabella's mind raced, her inner voice firm and commanding. "I can do this. I will protect my baby. I won't let fear paralyze me." The night outside was cruel, but she had found an ally, however small, and that realization bolstered her courage. Sweat mixed with snowflakes on her brow as she gritted her teeth, determined to face whatever came next. Each contraction reminded her of the urgency, each second ticking by in suspense. The warmth of the house, the soft murmur of concern from Mrs. Callahan, and her own steadfast resolve became a lifeline against the unforgiving night, a promise that she would endure, no matter the cost, until safety and her child were secured. Dorian leaned back against the velvet armchair, swirling the amber liquid in his crystal glass with a casual flick of his wrist. He laughed, a deep, carefree sound that echoed through the grand ballroom, entirely disconnected from the world outside. Vivian's hand rested lightly on his arm, her eyes sparkling with mischief and delight, and he returned her smile with a wink, the epitome of charm and arrogance intertwined. Around him, the party continued in full swing, guests oblivious to anything beyond the glittering walls of the mansion, toasting to wealth, success, and the illusion of perfection. Every detail of the celebration was meticulously crafted to impress, to display status and opulence, and Dorian reveled in it. The thought of Isabella, standing outside in the cold, never crossed his mind. In his mind, he rationalized his betrayal with ease. She would understand, he told himself, eventually. After all, he deserved to enjoy life, to indulge, to flaunt his power and success. Isabella's pleas were inconvenient interruptions to his pleasure, nothing more. His entitlement whispered to him that her suffering was irrelevant, a minor consequence in the grand scheme of maintaining appearances and social dominance. He had earned his lifestyle, his power, his ability to command admiration and envy from everyone around him, and nothing, not even the woman carrying his child, was permitted to tarnish that image. Narcissism wrapped itself around him like a second skin, comforting him, shielding him from any pangs of guilt or doubt. Yet, even as he laughed and charmed the crowd, a subtle tension lingered, an invisible thread that hinted at impending consequences. Somewhere in the shadows, beyond the warmth and lights, was a reckoning waiting. The audience, aware of Isabella's plight, could see the seeds of his downfall forming even as he remained blind to them. Dorian's arrogance, his ignorance of reality beyond the mansion walls, and his obsession with appearances painted him not as a tragic hero but as a man teetering on the edge of moral collapse. The night's indulgence, while intoxicating in the moment, was merely the calm before the storm that would inevitably sweep through his carefully constructed world, leaving only the consequences of his choices in its wake. A sudden, sharp pain shot through Isabella's abdomen, making her gasp and clutch her swollen belly. She stumbled against the doorway of Mrs. Callahan's home, knees wobbling under her weight as the contractions came in relentless waves. The cold from the night still clung to her skin, but now it was accompanied by a more urgent, searing agony that left her breathless and trembling. Each contraction seemed stronger than the last, rippling through her body with cruel precision, and she sank onto the nearest chair, pressing a hand to her forehead as sweat mixed with the melting snowflakes on her skin. Her heart pounded in her chest, and fear surged, wild and unrelenting, fear for herself, fear for the baby, and a desperate dread that she might not make it to safety in time. Through the haze of pain, Isabella fumbled for her phone with trembling fingers, dialing emergency services with urgent, almost frantic persistence. "Please, please, I'm pregnant, I'm having contractions. I need help," she cried, her voice breaking as tears stung her eyes. The operator's calm but firm instructions guided her, telling her to stay seated and wait, but every second felt like an eternity. Each wave of pain brought her closer to panic, her body shivering violently despite the warmth inside Mrs. Callahan's house. The kind neighbor hovered close, offering a steadying hand and soothing words. "You're going to be fine, Isabella. Just breathe with me. Help is on the way," she said, her voice a lifeline in the chaos of the night. Outside the mansion, the sounds of Christmas revelry carried faintly on the wind, a cruel reminder of the life Isabella had been abandoned by. Laughter and music floated through the air, Dorian's rich, carefree voice mingling with Vivian's sultry giggles, completely oblivious to the terror and pain that gripped his wife mere blocks away. The contrast was unbearable, the opulent celebration inside, the sparkling lights and joyous faces, while Isabella battled for her child's survival and icy desperation outside. She gritted her teeth through the pain, forcing herself to stay upright, to focus on the breaths she could control, the moments she could endure. Her mind, though racked with panic and fear, refused to give in. "I will not let this night destroy me. I will bring my baby into this world. I am stronger than the darkness around me," she thought, drawing on a reservoir of determination that burned as fiercely as the pain surging through her body. The distant wail of sirens cut through the quiet streets like a beacon of hope, growing louder as the ambulance approached. Isabella's knees trembled violently, and she leaned heavily against Mrs. Callahan, clutching her abdomen as another contraction gripped her. The flashing lights painted the snow in red and blue streaks, and she could see the paramedics leap from their vehicle with swift, practiced urgency. "Ma'am. We're here. Let's get you inside and check on your baby," one of them called, voice commanding yet gentle, guiding her toward the ambulance. Relief and fear collided in her chest as they carefully helped her into the back, strapping her onto the stretcher with professional efficiency while keeping her calm. Every bump along the snowy street sent jolts of pain through her, but the paramedics' steady presence reassured her, their experienced hands a lifeline she desperately needed. On the sidewalks and across the street, neighbors gathered in small clusters, whispers of disbelief and gossip floating through the frosty air. Some shook their heads in judgment, murmuring about Dorian's callousness and the scandal of a millionaire husband abandoning his pregnant wife on Christmas Eve. Others simply stared in shock, horrified that someone could be left to suffer in the cold while so many celebrated inside a glittering mansion. Each passing comment only highlighted the disparity between Isabella's desperate struggle and the oblivious world behind the mansion's doors, creating a tension that gripped the neighborhood with a mix of moral outrage and curiosity. Inside the ambulance, Isabella gritted her teeth, feeling another contraction tighten like a vice, but she drew strength from the paramedics' calm reassurance. Her thoughts raced, would she and the baby survive this ordeal? Could she endure the pain long enough to reach the hospital? The suspense was unbearable, each moment stretching longer as she fought against fear and exhaustion, her mind flickering between panic and determination. Yet beneath the immediate terror, a clear lesson emerged: selfishness and indulgence carry consequences. Dorian's blind pursuit of pleasure had left his wife and unborn child in peril, exposing the harsh truth that wealth and status cannot shield one from the moral cost of cruelty. Isabella's suffering illuminated a stark reality: the world may celebrate those who flaunt power, but the price of neglect and selfishness is paid in pain and heartbreak, and the universe has a way of making even the arrogant face the consequences of their actions. By the following morning, Dorian's carefully curated world began to crumble in ways he had never anticipated. Videos of the previous night surfaced online, guests snapping photos and recording clips of the lavish party while Isabella struggled outside, her desperate face briefly visible in one shaky video captured by a passerby. Within hours, the footage went viral, flooding social media feeds and sparking outrage. Friends and acquaintances shared their disbelief, some tagging Dorian in posts filled with condemnation and disbelief. The world that once seemed so admiring now turned critical, dissecting every action, every choice, and every laugh he had shared with Vivian. The illusion of perfection shattered, leaving him exposed and vulnerable. Calls and messages poured in relentlessly. Business partners, concerned not just about their social reputations but about moral liability, demanded explanations. "Dorian, what were you thinking?" one voice hissed over the phone, tempered with barely hidden fury. Family members confronted him in person, faces etched with disappointment and betrayal. Even distant relatives expressed dismay, shaking their heads at a man whose wealth and charm had once seemed untouchable. The scale of public scrutiny was overwhelming, his image, once carefully polished, tarnished beyond immediate repair. Legal advisors warned of potential lawsuits. Negligence and endangerment were no longer abstract possibilities, they were real, looming threats. Vivian's reaction to the fallout was complex. At first, she clung to him, feigning loyalty as the social whirlwind threatened to engulf them both. But cracks appeared almost immediately. Her admiration for his wealth and power was tempered by the reality of public disgrace and moral reckoning. She began to question whether her own reputation and safety were worth remaining in his orbit. Her sly glances, once playful and conspiratorial, became measured and cautious, betraying unease as the world outside their gilded walls pressed in. In stark contrast, Isabella's strength and resilience shone with clarity. Safe, recovering in the hospital with her newborn, she drew support from friends, neighbors, and medical staff. Every news report, every headline about Dorian's disgrace reminded her not of fear but of triumph. The woman who had endured cold, pain, and abandonment now embodied courage and perseverance. The juxtaposition was undeniable. While Dorian's arrogance and selfishness had led him to public ruin, Isabella's endurance, determination, and moral fortitude had elevated her above the chaos. The narrative had shifted, and the world could see it, one of power and cruelty brought low, and one of resilience and love rising stronger than ever. Isabella lay on the hospital bed, sweat beading on her forehead as another contraction gripped her with merciless intensity. The fluorescent lights above cast a clinical glow over the room, but she hardly noticed the sterile environment. All that mattered was the tiny life struggling alongside her. Doctors and nurses moved around her with precision, their hands steady and experienced, giving instructions in calm, urgent tones. "Breathe, Isabella. You're doing perfectly. Focus on the baby." One contraction at a time, one nurse urged, guiding her through the rhythmic surge of pain. Every fiber of her body screamed in protest, yet she summoned a courage she hadn't known she possessed, clinging to the knowledge that she was bringing new life into the world. Her mind raced between fear and determination. "I can do this. I have to do this. Nothing can break me now," she thought, gripping the sides of the bed with white-knuckled intensity. The pain was overwhelming, sharp and relentless, but Isabella refused to succumb. She drew strength from her vision of holding her baby safely in her arms, from the hope that this small miracle would mark a new beginning for both of them. Every breath, every cry, every contraction became a testament to her resilience, her endurance, and her unwavering commitment to protect her child. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the moment arrived. A wail pierced the room, a fresh, strong sound that made Isabella's heart soar. The baby was healthy, a perfect, tiny being with fingers curling instinctively around her mother's hand. Tears streamed down Isabella's face as relief washed over her in waves, mingling with the lingering exhaustion and pain. Nurses gently placed the newborn against her chest, and a sense of profound joy enveloped the room, erasing the shadows of the night before. The birth was more than a physical triumph, it was a symbolic rebirth. For Isabella, the child represented hope, resilience, and the triumph of morality and courage over cruelty and neglect. The night's torment, Dorian's abandonment, and Vivian's indulgence faded against the pure, untainted joy of new life. In that hospital room, Isabella found justice in its most personal form, the power to endure, survive, and embrace a future unshackled by betrayal. Each heartbeat of the newborn resonated with the promise of a fresh start, a reminder that even in the darkest winters, life, hope, and love could prevail. A week later, Isabella stood in the sleek, glass-walled office of Dorian's law firm, her posture composed and unyielding. Across the polished table, Dorian's eyes flickered nervously, guilt and arrogance warring for dominance on his face. He opened his mouth to speak, but Isabella raised a hand, halting him with calm authority. "I don't need your excuses, Dorian," she said, her voice steady, carrying the weight of every sleepless night, every contraction, every moment she had spent abandoned in the cold. "What you did, leaving me on Christmas Eve, while partying with Vivian, it's unforgivable. And I'm done being a part of your selfish world." Dorian shifted uncomfortably, trying to summon charm or justification, but the words faltered on his lips. He had grown accustomed to controlling every situation, to having his wealth and influence bend circumstances to his favor. Yet here was Isabella, once dependent, once trusting, now a force of clarity and strength he could not manipulate. Legal papers lay on the table, protective measures, custody arrangements, and a settlement designed not to punish but to secure her and her child's future. Her lawyer's calm presence reinforced Isabella's resolve, but it was her own unwavering composure that struck Dorian hardest. "Do you even understand the consequences of what you've done?" Isabella continued, her tone firm yet measured. "I will raise our child in safety and love, away from your cruelty. You've lost more than you know, Dorian: respect, trust, and the future you imagine for yourself with me. And it's entirely your own doing." For the first time, Dorian was silent, his arrogance crumbling under the weight of accountability. Vivian's absence from the confrontation was telling. Her loyalty, once unquestioned, now faltered as the reality of their public disgrace and moral failure became undeniable. Isabella, on the other hand, felt a profound sense of catharsis. She realized that her strength did not come from wealth, luxury, or a man's promises. It came from within, from resilience, courage, and the fierce love she had for her child. Walking out of the office, she held her head high, each step echoing independence. Dorian's empire of arrogance had faltered, but Isabella had risen, unshaken. The confrontation was not just about justice, it was about reclaiming her life, her dignity, and her power. In that moment, she embraced freedom, knowing she needed no one to define her worth. Months had passed since that bitter Christmas Eve, and Isabella now moved through her days with a quiet, unwavering strength. Her newborn, a healthy, bright-eyed boy, slept peacefully in a crib near the sunlit window of their new apartment. Gone were the gilded walls of Dorian's mansion, replaced with a modest, warm home filled with the sounds of love and life. Friends and neighbors, once distant or hesitant, had become her support system, rallying around her with meals, laughter, and encouragement. Every corner of the apartment carried the subtle marks of her independence, simple decorations she had chosen herself, photos capturing small victories, and the soft hum of a home created with intention and care. One crisp morning, Isabella wrapped her baby warmly and stepped into the freshly fallen snow outside, her boots crunching against the white blanket covering the streets. She inhaled the cold air deeply, feeling it fill her lungs with clarity and liberation. The contrast to that Christmas Eve was stark. The terror, isolation, and betrayal had been replaced with calm, hope, and self-assuredness. She held her child close, whispering promises of safety and love, knowing that each step forward was a declaration of resilience. Later, she decorated the apartment for Christmas, stringing lights and placing ornaments on the tree with her baby in her arms, laughter bubbling despite the quiet of the small room. The joy was simple, unpretentious, yet infinitely more satisfying than the opulence she had once known, a true testament to the life she had fought to reclaim. Meanwhile, news of Dorian's downfall continued to circulate. The public exposure of his negligence and indulgence had led to business losses, fractured relationships, and social disgrace. Vivian's departure was quietly noted, her loyalty dissolving in the face of scandal and accountability. The world had watched as arrogance and selfishness led to ruin, a stark counterpoint to Isabella's perseverance and triumph. As Isabella tucked her baby into bed that night, the soft glow of the Christmas lights reflected in her eyes. She understood fully that she had survived, not through wealth or luxury, but through courage, determination, and love. In her heart, she carried a profound certainty: life could break you, but it could also forge you into someone stronger. And in that strength, she had found justice, empowerment, and the true meaning of resilience. As Isabella rocked her baby gently in the quiet of the night, she allowed herself a moment of reflection. The events of the past weeks, the cold night, Dorian's betrayal, the relentless pain, and the ultimate triumph of bringing her child safely into the world, had transformed her in ways she could scarcely articulate. She thought about trust, how fragile it could be, and yet how resilient the human heart was when pushed to its limits. Family, she realized, was not defined by wealth or appearances, but by care, presence, and unwavering support. Her neighbors, her friends, the strangers who had helped her in the snow, these were the people who had shown the true meaning of compassion. She glanced down at her baby's tiny fingers curling around hers and felt a surge of pride and empowerment. Wealth, Dorian's luxurious lifestyle, all the material indulgence, it meant nothing without empathy or conscience. Courage, morality, and love were the forces that endured, the forces that had carried her through despair and into safety. Isabella knew she had been tested, and she had not only survived but emerged stronger, wiser, and unshakably self-reliant. In her heart, she carried a simple truth: life's greatest victories were not measured in riches or status, but in the strength to rise, the courage to act, and the morality to do what was right.